So this is the copper that I mixed. This is my test paper. One of my envelopes always dies. So I test my nib, I test my color on here to make sure that the foil in the return address and the foil that I'm mixing, or the ink that I'm mixing, actually match. I noticed the first time around when I mix this, because these are their imitations, I did their save the dates as well, that the copper in their return address did not quite match the copper in the ink. They were on two different sides of the envelopes. You couldn't really tell, but it was also on navy blue, which I don't know. The navy had a different effect on the copper than the gray does. Looks just a hair different. I think I'm probably the only person who could tell. All right, so what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about what products I use. Again, I cannot reiterate enough, you guys, that this is my recipe. This is what I use because of my hand and the nibs I like to use. And every once in a while, if I'm doing a different font or I'm using a different nib, sometimes I do have to tweak my recipe a little bit to make it flow the way I want it to. This is a pretty easy one because I'm using a nib that is my tried and true. It's my favorite. So I can basically mix this ink by the look of it. I am a cook, not a baker. I don't use recipes. So my tripod's around here somewhere. Sorry, this one's a little ad hoc today. All right, so I'm going to go over my nib and everything in just a second. All right, so here are the things that I use. Not this guy, because this is actually our example of what not to use. This is what I have used for this particular recipe. Tap that down so it actually doesn't roll away. And my gum Arabic, which is back here. There we go. All right, so lots of people ask why I use the gum Arabic. The reason I use it is for consistency and viscosity. And I'm going to open this ink up real quick, if I can do it with one hand. All right, so you guys can kind of see what the consistency is. It's about the consistency of cream. And I've noticed that the copper has a different look to it. It's a little bit more of a liquid metallic, like a liquid metal, than the gold or the rose, which just look different for some reason. And yes, I have a hard time getting the gum Arabic off. Every once in a while, I'll get all the way down to the bottom. By the time it's done, I just can't get that stinking lid off again. All right, so I use liquid gum Arabic. It's just my personal preference. I haven't worked a whole lot with the powder. I work with the liquid a lot. I know how it functions. So it's kind of, if it's not broken, don't fix it kind of thing. So the reason I have this red out, we're going to get to in just a second. But let me get you on the tripod, and I'm going to mix it for you in this little bowl so you guys can see what's going on. All right, so the brush I use to mix gouache is specific. I use this guy. It is an old beat up. It's pretty stiff. I have two of these that I use when I mix stuff because I can really cram it into the bottom. And you can hear it. It's a stiff bristle. Let's see if I can actually tell what this is. This is a level 3 Brilliant Artist Loft. I mean, I have had this brush probably pushing 10 years, and it's just my work brush. Like, I don't use it for painting unless I'm doing a dry brush or something. All right, so the first thing I do is I mix my gouache. Someone had mentioned they can't get this gouache in the US. I bought it in the US. I got it at Blick, so you can definitely find it. However, any metallic will work except this one. This brand does not like me, or I don't like it, one of the two. It's a different consistency, and it's a little bit too close to acrylic. Well, I mean, it is an acrylic polymer. Maybe that's why. I haven't really looked at the difference. No, I said it's a little bit more like acrylic. It says acrylic. That's why it doesn't work. This is a great color. I use this a lot. That indigo and bronze painting I did a while ago of the leaves, that was with that piece, that color. Let me grab it. This is that bronze. It's gorgeous. I love it, but it doesn't re-wet, so it does not work well for ink. So don't use this guy. All right. Yes, I have a pair of copper flats, and one day, they're from Zara, they're super cute, I really like them, they're really low profile on the side, and I've nicked the toes up enough times. It's like, you know, I wish I wish shoe polish came in metallics so I could kind of gussy these up so they don't look so old. I was like, wait, I wonder if gouache works. It totally does. So I've used the copper and the gold on my shoes. Anyhow, any metallic gouache will work except something that is that acrylic. Do not like that. So the reason I mix my gouache first is if I add gouache into a liquid, it's much harder to get it to dissolve all the way. So I usually start with that first, with a little bit of water until I get my gouache dissolved, and then I can add everything else. Now the reason I have my red out is because when I took this color, now I did this in my jar, but you guys will get the point. So when I put this down out of my ink, it wasn't quite red enough because when I added the powder, it changed the color just a little bit. So right out of the tube, it was great. But once I added that powder, it made it a little too gold. So what I did was I added a touch of red to redden it up a little bit. So I go through and I dissolve this just a tad. So once I have that liquefied a bit, then I can add in my water and my gum arabic and my powder. And I always test my color along the way. So here's my envelope that I'm using. So you can see down here at the bottom where it thins out a little bit. Let me see if I can actually get it to show. It's easier to see it in person. It's a little thin. I can see, oh, right there, you can barely see it. I can see the envelope through. See how thin it is? First thing, add to liquefy before you add water. Oh, it's just water. I did paint with just a touch of water to get the paint to actually dissolve. So this is a little bit thin to me. Now we can do two things to thicken up. One is adding our powder. The second is adding our gum arabic. So I use gum arabic to make it a little bit more stable. And I add, this is actually the super bronze rather than the copper, because that's what the art store had. So that's what I got. It is a little bit more gold and less red, which I also like, because the copper foil I use tends to not be on the super red side. Which is why I had to add the red paint into my big jar, because my copper was just a little bit too gold. Alright, so then I test my color out again, and oh god, please remember put the lid back on your powder. If you knock that thing on the floor, it goes absolutely everywhere. Alright, so our consistency is a little bit better. It's still a little on the thin side for me. And I'm going to put some on a nib and try to write with it and see how we do without the gum arabic. So let's talk about this nib real quick. This is the nib I'm using. This is actually an Imperial, but I usually use a Hunt 101. And anybody who saw my scope this morning knows I absolutely hate putting ink on my pen with a brush. It's actually pretty stable. The copper I have found is a little bit more stable than the other metallics. I think it's probably just the type of pearlex because it's so much more pigmented. However, in order to stabilize it over a longer period of time, I always add a little bit of that gum arabic. That was actually probably a little too much for this project because I'm mixing in a tiny little bowl, but you guys get my drift. Alright, I'm going to turn off this lamp and see if I can stop casting shadows. There we go, it's a little better. I have some very cloudy afternoon light, so it's not very bright in here today. See that? I don't know if you guys can tell. This is definitely thicker. Not by much, but a little bit. So this was our original. This was without the powder and without the gum arabic. This is with powder without gum arabic, and then this has the gum arabic in it. definitely has a different consistency. So what I did was, as I was mixing it up here, I was matching it to my return address. And of course, the differences are so small, you can't even see them on the camera. But you can definitely see them in person. So this bottom one, you guys can see how thin it is. That is definitely why I like to add both the powder and the gum arabic. Now the reason I add the powder to begin with is I prefer having two different levels of metallic. Both the paint, the gouache, and the powder both have a different type of metallic to them. And adding them together gives me much better metallic consistency. So that is how I mix metallic ink, guys. So it should be about the consistency of cream. And I'm going to scoop this into this. Waste not. I think the copper is actually one of my favorites. It's really easy to work with. If you've never mixed a metallic, I would say probably start with mixing a copper. I think it's easiest to mix, personally. Alright guys, so that is how you mix metallic ink. Isn't it pretty? Write something with it. Alright. What should I write? Oh, this is just a regular jar from the art supply store. It is nothing exciting. Yeah, I eyeball things. I'm not a baker. I am a chef. It's a very, very clear difference. Alright, let me wipe off my desk real quick. I got a little bit of water on it. Yeah, it does have a touch of red gouache in it. Because when I added the powder had enough gold in it that my ink was slightly too gold to match my return address. So I compensated by adding a tad bit of that red. Let me grab some paper. Let's see, ooh, what color should I use? Let's do, let me see what colors I have. Aubergine it is, because that's what I've got. Alright, so we're going to do copper on purple. I'm going to switch you sides, because I am right-handed. I really wish this tripod was a little bit taller. This paper is just from Paper Source. It's from their Luxe collection. I usually sit much closer to my paper when I'm writing, which means if I mess up, I can't really fix it as easily. Alright, Ash, there you go. Ashton, in copper, on purple. It's actually a pretty good combo. Alright, Ash, you want to take a picture? And yes, you can mix this for later use. So this big jar I've had this copper jar going since I started their save the dates for this client. So their wedding is in, I should know when their wedding is. I need to mail them the end of the month, March, April, May, end of May. So I sent their save the dates out quite a while ago. Oh, sorry. The only reason I wrote Ash's name is because I needed a word to write really quick. Yes, it does work with non-metallic gouache. If you want a metallic finish, it's best to use metallic and metallic, but you could also use a matte and a metallic if you want something a little less metallic. Or you can do a non-metallic gouache with a gum arabic and water for regular ink if you're not going for metallic. I personally do mix large batches, and as I start to run out, I just throw some more in there. I don't know. My gold I've been remixing and remixing for probably 2 years. It's kind of, I guess that's probably kind of gross. I don't know if it counts as gross. I think it's fine. Whatever. I have noticed that gum Arabic starts to smell a little funky after a while. My gum or my gold smells a little funny. So there you go, guys. That is how you mix metallic. That's how I mix metallic. I'm actually quite pleased with that, Ashton. I think it looks quite nice. So I'm using this font. Let me show you guys what I'm working on today for an invitation suite I have coming up. So here's the lettering for it. Page 1, page 2. So it's that same font. You guys can see my pencil lines in the background. I haven't taken all those off yet. So this is for a suite I have coming up with Gilded Lily and Jess Galfo, who is a blogger bride for Style Me Pretty. It's going to be for her invitation suite. So you guys will see that design coming up here pretty soon. All right, I think that's it for today. Any other questions on how to mix metallic ink? Anybody? Any more questions? Give you guys a second to type. While you are thinking or typing. Thank you. All right, so here's my rose. Does that last longer than the fingered? I don't know what that means. Let me grab my gold as well, without stepping on the envelopes that I have all over the floor. Fine Tech. I don't know, actually. I've never done Fine Tech in a batch. I worked with Fine Tech for the very first time this morning. So I'm not sure about that one. Anybody know the answer to that? This was in my bag one time when my black ink leaked. Oops. So here's my gold. This one obviously has leaked before, or I overspun it and then it dripped on me. Yes, I do have to spin it as I'm writing. The metallic does settle. So that's the rose. Here's the copper. These are not totally mixed up. I usually have to mix it up with that stiff brush because the metallic does settle on the bottom. You can see it on the side here. These jars are just from the art supply store. They're like $1. They come in many different sizes. So I have an 8 ounce, or 2 8-ounce. This is probably a 6 ounce. Even though the gold should be in the bigger because that's what I use the most. I just didn't have a big one when I mixed it. So there we go. There's metallic. I actually have some gouache and some powder to mix up a blue metallic. Maybe I'll do that in another video in a few days in case anybody misses this one. Alright guys, that's how you mix metallic. I expect some metallic posts on Instagram with me tagged in it, just so you know. So you'd be like, bam, nailed it. Especially if you mix an unusual color, I'd love to see it. Alright guys, have a great afternoon. See you later.